So they'll be your audience today. And I'm Mohammed Bilal Akram, where we have interacted before as well, sir. I'm Additional Director, Mid-Career Management course over here at PAS Campus, sir. So, ladies and gentlemen, today we have with us Dr. Abid Suleri. He is Executive Director, Sustainable Development Policy Institute. Dr. Suleri served as a member of the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council, National Economic Advisory Council for 3 terms. He had been the member of National Advisory Council of the Planning Commission. He convened the National Coordination Committee on Prime Minister Agriculture Transformation Plan. Earlier, he remained the member of the Board of Management of Pakistan State Oil from 2009 to 2011, where he chaired the board's Audit and Accounts Committee. He also served on 3 judicial commissions on environmental issues. Currently, Dr. Suleri is serving as member of the Pakistan Climate Change Council. He is also member of the Board of Directors of the National Disaster Risk Management Fund and chairs the board's accounts and procurement committees. Moreover, Dr. Suleri is actively involved in different regional policymaking forums. He currently co-chairs the Board of Climate Action Network South Asia and is also serving as a member of the Permanent Organization Committee of the South Asian Economic Summit. He also served as the lead expert for World initiatives from Pakistan. Dr. Suleri has represented Pakistan in various official and civil society delegations, including the UN Sustainable Development Summit, the UNFCCC Conference of Parties, and WTO ministerial conferences. His research interests include political economy of sustainable development, geo-economic cooperation, food security, and climate change. He is an acclaimed writer, and besides publishing in academic journals, he also contributes his policy analysis on sustainable development issues in mainstream print and electronic media. He is also editor-in-chief of the SDPI peer-reviewed journal, Journal of Development Policy Search and Practice. Dr. Suleri earned his PhD in food security from the University of Greenwich, UK. Thank you very much, sir. It's an honor to have you, and over to you, please.
Thank you, Bilal, for this generous introduction. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Today, we'll be discussing this climate financing for adaptation and mitigation, and we'll try to see that what are the options available and how Pakistan can get benefit of those options. But before we start, this world is passing through difficult times. This sustainable development in unusual times. This was the main theme of our annual conference last December. And we were trying to look at triple C crisis, COVID, conflict, especially the war in Ukraine, and climate change, and how these triple C crises, they would be negatively or positively affecting the countries, especially the countries which have a 4C crisis as well, which is complacency. And by complacency, I mean those who are not prepared enough, for those who haven't done their homework to remain resilient. Now, one of the impacts of this triple C crisis is that financing climate action, it have turned difficult. Yes, due to these 3, the rich countries, they don't have enough money to spare. They have their own problems. There are 3 types of existential threats that one talks about. One is a global existential threat, that was COVID, and we saw when COVID hit the world, the whole world, they were willing to share the vaccine, they were willing to share the other medical equipments, and even IMF was willing to give extra SDR, special drawing rights, to the needy countries, because it was a global existential threat. Ukraine war is a regional existential threat. it is a threat for whole of the Europe. Of course, the second focus was on Ukraine. Countries they are donating to Ukraine, especially the Europe, NATO members, and the United States of America. And then there are national existential threats like floods that we were facing, or like many of the climate disasters that the countries they are facing within their national boundaries. And one can argue that the major priority would be tackling global existential threat, then regional, and only then the national existential threats would be taken care of. But taking care of them is an imminent, it is an urgent, rather more urgent than anything else. And I'll tell you why. But first, let's look at the impact of the 3 C's that I described. So with the COVID, the world economy shrank by around 4.3%. In 2020 and 2021, the foregone output loss in 2 years due to COVID was around $10.3 trillion, huge loss. Then the conflict in Ukraine, one of the immediate effect that one could see is energy crisis, especially the energy crisis in Europe, which put many European countries into recession. UK, Germany, Austria, there are some of them that are feeling the brunt. But also food insecurity, especially when Ukraine and Russia both they export almost 1/3 of wheat. They are one of the major exporters of the cooking oil and cooking oil seed, and Russia is one of the largest exporter of the ingredients for fertilizer. So their indirect effect and direct effect on food security, that is very much there as well. And that is also one of the reasons that global north is finding it difficult to lose its purse for climate financing. Now, due to this war, Pakistan, we are already facing this unprecedented inflation, but whole of the world is facing this unprecedented inflation. So it is estimated that in 2022, this war contributed to 2.9% in global inflation, and 1.9% would be its contribution towards the global inflation in 2023. So low growth and high inflation, in economics term, we call it stagflation. And world is passing through a stagflation, and that is one of the reasons when we're talking of climate financing, or when we're talking that global north is not doing enough, we need to keep in mind the context that why global north is not doing enough in this particular condition. Now, the third thing is climate change. And while we are talking at a macro level, the global level, this map starting from 1885 till 2020, it tells you how the monthly global mean temperature of the Earth. And every month, if the temperature is higher than the previous month, it turns brown or it turns red. And you can find that starting from 2001 till 2020, every passing month, every passing year is hotter than the previous one. And this is the type of climate change or the planet warming that the world is passing through. Now, one of the effects of this global warming is that extreme heat, it has become more frequent. It has become more frequent, and it has its unprecedented impacts, like the floods in Pakistan. Jacobabad, for example, last year, twice it was the world's hottest place on Earth. The temperature was more than 49 degrees Celsius in April as well as in May. But the same Jacobabad, which was the world's hottest and driest place in April and May, a few months down the road, it was inundated by flood water. Now, this global warming, it brought 3.2% more rains in Pakistan, and it also resulted in glacier melting in our Western Himalayan region. And this context, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to give it to you because when we're talking of this losses by floods in 2022, almost $30 billion, the cumulative loss and damage. Scientists, they're safely and very accurately, they're saying that almost half of it is due to global warming. And this global warming, all this planet warming, that can be attributed towards the indiscriminate use of fossil fuel by OPEC countries. So only OPEC countries, they are making, OECD countries, OPEC, OECD countries. So the OECD countries, they are contributing almost 70% towards this global warming by indiscriminate use of their fossil fuel. Now, when Pakistan talks of this loss and damage, and Pakistan talks of the international community should come forward to take care of some of those damages, the point that Pakistan is making now is climate justice. It is we need to remember that in 2010 floods, we convened a donors conference. So we had this donor conference for Pakistan, but in 2023, the Geneva Moot, it was not called a donor conference. It was called Climate Resilient Pakistan. And this is one of the instruments for climate financing that Pakistan is trying to use, fundraising for climate justice. We'll discuss how successful this instrument had been, but the point we are making here that when we're talking of climate financing, it's not only charity or donations, it is meeting the principles of climate justice. Those who had polluted the world and those who had brought it to the level where each passing month and each passing year is hotter than the previous one, they should take the maximum brunt and they should take care of their deeds so that the countries who are the least emitters, they can be compensated for their losses that they face due to a changing climate. Now, Geneva Moot, and I only wrote last Sunday about it in the news, Great Expectation. And my thesis is that while Pakistan has great expectation from international community, starting from earthquake of 2005, then Friends of Democratic Pakistan Forum, then floods of 2010, and now the Geneva Moot of 2023. The world has also expectations from Pakistan, and the world is asking Pakistan to come up with the plans that can prove that Pakistan has the capacity and the potential to absorb if it gets project financing. So in Geneva, the pledges that were made out of $10 billion, $8.2 billion, they are from multilateral development banks, $4.2 billion from Islamic Development Bank, $2 billion from World Bank, and then from ADB and this Asia Infrastructure Development Bank. These are project financing. They require a transparent, effective mechanism whereby Pakistan can produce tangible, doable projects, can meet those project deadlines, and can implement them. If Pakistan can implement them, Pakistan would be able to get some of the funding. If Pakistan couldn't, Pakistan will not get this funding. Most of this funding is loans, especially this multilateral development banks, $8.2 billion. They are loans. Some of them, they are in-kind support. Others are soft loans, and some of other they are grants. The minor amount is grants. So if more and more of such funding is it being conditional because it's project financing, it is being dispersed through multilateral development banks, then we need to see that what are the alternatives available for countries like Pakistan, and those alternatives are shrinking. Only last week after this Geneva Moot, the Saudi finance minister in Davos World Economic Forum, he very categorically said that the Saudi funding would be linked with reforms in the recipient countries, and there would be no blank checks, because Saudi is using Saudi taxpayers' money to support other countries. So this again highlights the importance of bringing reforms, institutionalizing those reforms, not only for getting bilateral support, but also for getting support from sources for climate financing. Now, there are certain bilateral international sources for climate financing. So apart from the sources that we are familiar with, for example, Saudi Arabia, China, UAE, and Qatar, there is this International Climate Fund by UK. There is International Climate Initiative by Germany. Germany also announced this global climate shield in COP27 at Sharm el-Sheikh. There are bilateral initiative by USAID, by Swiss Agency for Development Corporation, SDC, specific for India, which is called Indo-German Development Corporation. There is the Swedish International Development Corporation, and again another specific for India, Indo-French Development Corporation. So these are some of the bilateral international sources. The one I listed here, they are specific for climate change. Then there are some multilateral funds. For example, Global Environment Fund. This is GEF Trust Fund, which was made with the $4.43 billion worth of pledges. We have Special Climate Change Fund. We have CBD Fund, CBD mechanism, and we have UN Convention on to combat desertification, UNCCD, and all of them, they are catered under Global Environment Fund. Then we have Climate Investment Fund, we have Adaptation Fund, and both of them, they are taken care by World Bank. World Bank is the leading funder here. And then under UNFCCC and Paris Agreement, we have Green Climate Fund. Multilateral banks, as I said, they are very much relevant both bilaterally as well as multilaterally for these funds. We also have an Adaptation Fund. Adaptation Fund is one of the several international funds in the multilateral climate funding landscape. So here, these are the four main sources of climate financing. GEF, Global Environment Fund, which became operational in 2002 for least developed countries, and it became operational for Special Climate Change Fund in 2004. This is the current worth of GEF. The pledges that I showed you in the previous screen, those were the pledges, and this is what it is worth currently. World Bank, it has outside of the UNFCCC process, pilot program on climate resilience worth $1.1 billion. Adaptation Fund, which was established under Kyoto Protocol in 2009, it has almost $500 million. And Green Climate Fund, which was established in 2015 in COP Paris COP, which is worth around $2.5 billion. And then there is this loss and damage initiative, which was announced in COP27 last year in Sharm el-Sheikh. It is still being negotiated, and hopefully in COP28 this year in UAE, one would find that how much it worth. Green Climate Fund will be focusing on it, because if you look at it, it is $2.5 billion, one of the rich source for money. It enables three type of funding, rather four type of funding: micro proposal, which are including up to $10 million worth of projects; small proposal, which range from 10 to 50 million US dollar worth of project; medium proposal worth 50 to 250 million dollars; and then large proposal, which are above 250 million dollar. But again, this is not budgetary funding. country, the recipient country, they need to come up with tangible proposal, tangible projects if they want to get access to this sort of funding. Now, under Green Climate Fund, we have accredited entities which approve project and programs. And project and programs, they are forwarded to them through NDA, which is a national local authority agencies. So these are the focal points, national designated authorities, which scrutinize the project proposal. They pass it on to accredited entities, which filter them and then pass it on to Green Climate Fund. So this is a cycle in which countries, they can actually get access to these funds. In Pakistan, we have Ministry of Climate Change as a nationally designated authority. Then we have focal points. This SRSPs, they are rural sport programs. They are one of the focal point for this. Silk Bank is another focal point, and National Disaster Risk Management Fund is also in the process of getting this accreditation. So they scrutinize this project. They start with this project generation, proposal generation, a concept notice prepared, proposal is submitted, then this proposal is evaluated, and it is sent to the board, and then the legal arrangements are made when board approve this funding, how this funding would be dispersed, and what are the conditionalities, what are the timelines, what are the milestones, etc. One of the mega projects that Pakistan is undertaking with GCF is Karachi, this public transport, where GCF is contributing $11 million worth in kind as a grant towards this Karachi BRT program. The whole cost of Karachi BRT is almost $500 million, and out of it, $11 million is coming from GCF. So just to give you the summary, GCF is one of the largest funds. We do have Adaptation Fund as well. We also have a Green Environment Fund under UNFCCC, which has provided close to $20 billion in grants and mobilized $107 billion so far. And then there is the discussion on loss and damage fund. Now, looking at these climate financing instrument, we three categories. One are mature instrument like Green Climate Fund. We know the vehicle which assesses the project. We know how those projects, the grant is disbursed, and we know how to report back. So these are mature instruments. Many of them, they closely collaborate with the IMF, World Bank, and ADB. So that's why institutionalizing reforms, they become important. So multilateral banking system, or the global banking system, that is copied here for a mature instrument. But then one is mindful of the fact that many of the vulnerable economies, they cannot fulfill the conditions of multilateral funding agencies, and that's where we have this emerging instrument. And emerging instrument, they are being used for climate adaptation, for example, climate insurance, or debt for climate swap, or other instruments which are not as stringent as straight this providing linear solution without any flexibility as multilateral development banks. And the third is these pilot instruments, which are being developed to finance climate adaptation and may be applied in the near future, for example, loss and damage fund. Our Geneva move was one of that pilot instrument where we were trying to look for some funding for our losses due to floods. And it encompasses all kind of pledges, loans, soft loans, grants, and in-kind assistance. Now, why Pakistan require this climate financing apart from this floods? Even if there were no floods, the blueprint that Pakistan has provided to reduce its emission and to greener its development footprint, it's called Nationally Determined Contributions, NDCs. So NDC is Pakistan's plan for mitigation and adaptation that Pakistan wants to pursue till 2030. So in next 9 years, that's where Pakistan want to reduce its carbon footprint in line with the many other international community members. So far they are voluntary in nature. And countries like Pakistan, while they submitted their NDCs, they also asked for some financial support. For example, when we are talking of mitigation or renewable energy, we are saying that by 2030, 60% of our energy mix, it would be from renewable energy resources. We are also saying that in this water basin restoration, that will enhance our protection areas, protection area cover from 12 to 15%. We are also saying that EVs, electrical vehicles, there would be 30% of our total transport share in next 9 years. But then we are asking for some climate financing. There are certain things that Pakistan can do from its own resources, but then there are certain things that Pakistan cannot do from its own resources, and that's where climate financing is required. Apart from the instrument and the type of climate financing that I showed you earlier, there is another potential source of climate financing, and which is private sector lending. So private sector, through its ESG mechanism, ESG is their environmental, social, and governance responsibilities. Private sector, and especially corporate sector, they are also here to fund the NDCs and climate financing requirement of different countries. Now, Pakistan has categorized its NDCs into higher ambition, into high priority areas, into medium priority areas, and low priority areas. Now, these priority areas, the key areas, if one look on this slide, are water sector, it's agriculture, land, and health co-benefit of climate and health. It's waste and water and sanitation management. It's air pollution, biodiversity, taking care of ecosystem, and disaster preparedness. So these are some of the key sectors Pakistan is focused on. Pakistan, as I said, wants to reduce its emission by 50%. Pakistan is saying that it can reduce this emission almost 1/3 by its own resources, but then rest of it is conditional to receiving funding. And Pakistan requires almost $234 billion in next 9 years. This is the total cost of for Pakistan to transition to a climate resilient and low carbon emission development footpath. Out of it, most of it would be towards mitigation, and second one is adaptation. Third one is cross-cutting, both mitigation and adaptation. And ladies and gentlemen, as you would know, that adaptation means living with climate change. So I know it's cold and I'm wearing this warm jacket. So it means that I'm adapting to winter weather. Mitigation is reducing the emission. Mitigation is always expensive, but both mitigation and adaptation, both of them, they have to be taken care of. So even if there were no flood of 2022 and 2021, our requirement for climate financing for next 9 years, it was around $234 billion. Now, why we require it, and looking at the budgetary outlay, one can very easily find that why Pakistan need this sort of money. The budget for current fiscal year, if one looks at it, although that budget is now completely out and completely out of alignment after the floods, that is one of the reasons that the IMF program is in limbo. We have to revise our macroeconomic framework. But looking at this, whatever the numbers were, their implication of climate change, you will find that the share of climate change division was only 0.1%. Non-development climate expenditure of federal government accounted for only 7.2%, and we'll see that where are those non-development climate expenditure. It is mainly administration of environmental protection, very little money for research and development. Then if one looks at all sort of climate change related allocation in the budget, you will find there are allocation for water quality monitoring, there are allocation for Green Pakistan program, there are allocation for climate resilient urban settlement. Islamabad Zoo project is also one of those allocations. And you will find that the out of total 4.7 billion rupee which federal government has, the allocations are only 23 million rupees, 9.4 billion, 19 million, 100 million. Similarly, for total transport sector budget allocation is almost 2.3 billion, out of which the green and blue line metro buses, they will get 1.5 billion rupees. Rawat Faisalabad metro, it would get 100 million rupees. Diesel locomotive, which would be although a non-favorable investment, but it is better than transporting in diesel operated trawlers. It would get around 2.3 billion rupees. So this is the sort of allocation in the budget. Power sector efficiency program, electric distribution efficiency, and better energy storage process. You will find some allocation there. Much needed transmission line, and we saw this blackout in Pakistan yesterday. It requires almost 50 billion rupees for its renovation. And then we have renewable energy projects. Here again, there is a policy dilemma. The more we will go towards renewable or off-grid energy solutions, that would increase our capacity payment charges to IPPs. The more we will go towards using solar tube wells, it would have an impact on our groundwater table. Indiscriminate extraction of water whole day, that would lead to soil salinity and soil sodic soil. So all of these are the policy conduent and policy dilemma and policy trade-offs of going greener versus remaining in our traditional policy measures. But the share of climate financing from GCF, from Adaptation Fund, from GEF, that is quite minimal. And Pakistan required this share because out of this 9.6 billion rupees that Pakistan would be collecting this year in the federal divisible pool, after providing the provincial share, federal government would only be left with 4.7 billion rupees, and it would require another 5 billion rupees as loan in order to run the PSDP, in order to return previous loan, in order to return our defense budget, and in order to meet salaries and pay and pension. But our share in this whole, for example, from multilateral development banks, the climate financing share, you will find that it is one of the lowest in South Asia in last few years. In 2020, our share was only 944 million. India's share was $3.5 billion. Bangladesh share was $1.1 billion. In 2019, again, our share was less than this. So one needs to see that what can be done differently. Even in the GCF portfolio, the Green Climate Fund, which is the largest fund, Pakistan's share is only $234 million. So we don't have the capacity to prepare a project, something that I wrote last Sunday, a great expectation. While we have great expectation from international community have the expectation that we should be able to write tangible, doable proposal, then deliver on the proposal, deliver on their milestone, and be able to claim the project financing, which unfortunately we are not able to do. Now, even if there is no money, Pakistan can also get benefit from debt for nature swap. So debt for nature swap is an instrument where indebted countries like Pakistan, they can negotiate with their lender that instead of paying the debt back to the lender, they would be spending it under the supervision of lender on a dedicated program of climate related or environment related, and this is called debt for nature swap. So Pakistan has the option to pursue for this debt for nature swap for floods. Pakistan has also established this ecosystem restoration fund. $180 million were assigned to this project, and it was decided that project proposal will be prepared and through a Green Climate Fund, and the money would be raised for Indus water restoration. Some of the COVID-related stimulus package, especially those linked with the tree plantation and the tsunami tree afforestation program of previous government, those were called Green Stimulus Package, and this is how they were charged to the multilateral development banks. Now, as I said, Pakistan has the potential for debt swap. Pakistan has done it earlier. For example, with Canada, Pakistan swapped after earthquake for education sector. With Germany, it swapped for education sector. Even before the earthquake in 2001, for Afghan refugees, it swapped about $85 million with Italy. For Norway, it swapped as part of Friends of Democratic Pakistan Forum in 2008-9, Norway and Belgium. So there is a history of debt swap, and Pakistan should now again float this instrument after the 2022 floods. Now, what are the challenges? Why Pakistan is not able to tap when we say that Pakistan needs additional financing, and when we say that money is lying whether in various climate financing instruments, or as part of debt for nature swap, or as part of bilateral or multilateral lenders, why Pakistan cannot avail it? The reasons are very simple. One of them is that the committed climate financing is not being dispersed. For example, the Green Environment Fund that was established in 2015 after this Paris COP15, it was decided that $100 billion per annum would be contributed towards it. And last year, the highest contribution that it received was almost $87 billion. So since 2015, it was established, and in last 8 years, it still hasn't touched the threshold that this fund has to achieve. So countries, they make commitment, but they don't fulfill it, especially the rich country. They rebundle, relabel, redesign their commitments. The second is that much of the funding, especially from multilateral donors, multilateral banks, it's loans, it's not grants, which actually push the recipient country to an unsustainable debt burden. But not only that they are loan, they are multilateral banks, they have their conditionalities attached to these funds. So country can only receive those funds if, for example, it is in an IMF program and it has a letter of comfort from IMF. Then climate project size, they are getting smaller. It is thinly spread because more and more countries, they want to get benefited of it. So these dedicated funds, they cannot afford to just give all the money to any one recipient country. So their size is getting reduced. As you saw that in case of Karachi BRT, it's only $11 million for a project worth $500 million worth. Similarly, the finance for emission reduction is increasingly not allocated to specific countries. It is again a generalized fund. So the main vulnerable country like Pakistan, we are not in a position to avail them, even if we are one of the countries most under threat due to this emission. But because our emissions are small, we cannot get benefit from this sort of funding. Private sector involvement in adaptation finance has been low, although the likes of Nestle and Pepsi and Coke, as part of their ESG and corporate social responsibilities, they are now coming forward to take care of climate financing. But the trust deficit between government and corporate sector and between the climate non-governmental climate groups and this corporate sector, it's still very much there. So countries cannot get benefit of this private sector funding. Also, the little climate financing is provided directly to government budget, but it's not in budgetary support. And debt-ridden countries, they are lacking support from multi-development banks and other development partners. Now, what is the way forward? The first and important is that countries like Pakistan, we need to scale up private sector climate financing. We know that it is difficult for us to avail project financing. It is difficult for us to spend project financing. We miss their deliverables. We miss the milestone. Resultantly, this funding, it gets suspended. It has a lot of ifs and buts attached with this. So perhaps we should trust on the private sector. For example, we should ask Pepsi or Nestle or Unilever or Angro, etc., to work on government-approved funding projects. So the projects which are shortlisted by NDA, the Nationally Designated Authority, one should ask private sector to implement them directly. That would improve the trust between government and the private sector. Private sector, instead of giving money to government, would be wholeheartedly willing to spend the money on those projects because it will bring them goodwill and it would bring them a good reputation in the market. The second is that Pakistan should go for green bonds and green loans. More recently, Pakistan has floated green bonds for WAPDA, which were oversubscribed, and this was a huge success. Pakistan should try to raise funds for some of the green initiative that the country is ready to take. Similarly, the public sector could play a powerful role in reducing constraint and catalyzing private sector climate financing. institutes like World Bank and IMF, they can actually be partnered with the global database provider so that we have the macroeconomic and climate-related data. In order to prepare good proposals, in order to prepare good projects, we require credible data, and we require credible data that can attribute and prove that, for example, rain in Balochistan, now scientists say that 75, its frequency last year, it increased by 75% due to global warming. Now, we require the scientific model and access to scientific models and to data so that we can attribute our extreme climate event to climate change with the help of that data. Another tool is the use of social bonds and sustainability bonds. So specific bond for social impacts, for example, addressing poverty or gender mainstreaming or environmental issue. And debt swap for nature, we have already discussed. Now, this become more important as only January 15. Antonio Guterres, he said it in Sharm el-Sheikh, he said it in on 9th of Jan during Geneva Moot, and he tweeted it on January 15 when he said, global financial system is broken. It favors wealthy nations and penalizes low and middle income countries. I urge leaders and international financial institutions to develop creative ways to ensure that developing countries can access financial help when they need it most. So, for example, Pakistan, if it requires financial help right now, and the financial help is linked with the IMF nod of approval, and IMF wants institutional reforms first. So one can agree in principle that IMF's recommended reforms or Pakistan's committed reforms, they are very important and essential. Pakistan should do them in any case. But people in Sindh or Balochistan or in South Punjab affected by floods, they can't be kept waiting for Pakistan to first fulfill its commitment on institutional reform and then be able to get access to funding from IMF and the World Bank and from Saudi Arabia. So the multilateral financial system, it needs to be more conducive towards countries in need. Now, in conclusion, while climate financing, it's an important financial and environmental diplomacy, rich country as part of their climate justice, as part of their climate financing and as part of their financial diplomacy, they should actually fulfill their commitments. If they will not be fulfilling their commitments, country would be a country like Pakistan or Bangladesh or Nepal, Sri Lanka will keep waiting in the hours of disaster. The setting is, second is more important is that we need to assess the financial need of developing countries. So we need to come up with the database number. So Pakistan should be able to tell that not the general number, $248 billion till 2030 to implement its NDCs, but a project-specific number, and then aggregating those numbers and providing it to the public sector financiers, multilateral financiers, and private sector financiers. And last but not least, the developing countries, they need to adopt to innovative climate financing instrument and approaches, for which we need to get prepared. We need to bring our own house in order. We don't need to fulfill the commitments that Pakistan made with IMF to please IMF or to get access to the funding from IMF and World Bank and Saudi Arabia, China, etc. We need to institutionalize those reforms in any case. We cannot afford to sell electricity and gas below its cost of procurement or below cost of generation. We cannot have 3 or 4 market rates for our local currency, which is diverting cash inflow to banks into hundi and hawalas. We need to do a lot in our ministries and department. Right now, after Geneva moot, NDRMF should announce a follow-up conference so that the Planning Commission and NDRMF, they can approach those who made commitments and pledges in Geneva. NDRMF can be used as a vehicle to float projects. So this was a broad overview of some of the climate financing available to Pakistan, what is required to access it, and why Pakistan is in dire need to